on this computer. All right. So Mark, we're split screen. I guess we're good with that. You see what I see? You're small and your CSG is large. Is that okay?
So Mark
right.
Herr is retired U.S. Air Force and lives in Chesaw, Washington, with his wife Pamela and children. Mark is the president and co-founder of the Center for Self-Governance, a nonprofit, nonpartisan political education and leadership organization. He is an author, film producer, policy writer, and political strategist and instructor. His political innovations are hailed as 21st century groundbreaking, cutting edge, and self-empowering by elected officials, business entrepreneurs, and parents nationwide. Give a warm welcome for Mark and his little helper there.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you say hello?
Hi.
That's my daughter, Eliza. My wife is out with her father and grandmother today. They're at the hospital. So thanks to my wife for running CSG. I can't run it very well, but she does a great job, coordinated with Jan. So it's an honor to be with Guardians of Liberty. In January of 2013, we had our very first CSG class in Missouri, there in Cape Girardeau. We originated in Tennessee, and Jan had called me in 2012 and asked us to come speak to her Tea Party group at the time. And anyway, so just it's an honor to be back in Cape Girardeau after over 11 years. Center for Self-Governance is a nonprofit. We teach leadership and self-governance, and our goal is to help you practice a systematic politics. If you haven't heard that term, you'll understand it after my presentation today. I started off in Tennessee in 2009. I went to the Tea Party movement in April. I was there because of the Obamacare, the $1.5 trillion bailouts plus Obamacare. And anyway, I have a master's degree, studied finance, and those are called Ponzi schemes in the private sector. Anyway, that was my off-the-couch moment at the time. It's completely different now. Our mission is simply to train leaders in self-governance who practice systematic politics in the arena of what we call the marble cake revolution. I'm going to explain what all that is, and I hope by the end of this presentation you'll be inspired to take our leadership and self-governance training, become practitioners of systematic politics who can compete in what we call the marble cake revolution. I'm going to skip through this intro video real quick. So there we go. So we have different types of training: biblical origins of self-governance, foundations and self-governance. We teach all 50 state constitutions and all of the substructures of government from school up to your state legislature. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Keep going.
Okay. And our leadership and self-governance training, which is primarily focused on developing leaders in self-governance who practice systematic politics. If you want more details about all of that training, you can go to centerforselfgovernance.com. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Groomers, Bullies, and Manipulators, Understanding the Marble Cake Revolution and How to Stop It. So I'm going to start with this graphic, and I'm going to need classroom participation. So Jan, I don't know who will be able to interact with me to give me the details from the crowd. I can't see very well. I know there's a crowd there. I have to rely on sound more. So if someone be willing to get closer to the computer to give me the feedback. So you've had a chance to look at your screen. It says, what type of cake do you prefer? Notice the two types of cakes on your screen. One is a layer cake and the other is a marble cake. Which type of cake do you prefer? Layer cake or marble cake? when it comes to government, do you prefer the boundaries between the federal and the state governments to be fixed? Or do you prefer the boundaries between the federal and state governments to be mixed? I really want you to take a poll, whoever's in charge of the meeting, take a poll. And those of you who prefer the marble cake, would you raise your hand so we could get a polling? They can count the numbers.
Okay.
Get a
let's see,
polling.
we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 for marble cake, okay? And who would
Okay,
like?
now I need to poll. Now I need the polling for those who prefer the layer cake, the fixed boundaries.
Fixed boundaries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. About 25. Just rough count. Go ahead, Mark.
Just have a slice of each.
If you would like a slice of each.
They'd like a slice of each, right? So politically, this is an important question for the American people, for you in Missouri and for those of you in Cape Girardeau. What type of political cake do you prefer in society? Do you prefer the boundaries of government to be mixed together? Do you prefer the boundaries between government to be fixed? This question is the starting point for the marble cake revolution. So high schoolers are taught in the 21st century that marble cake federalism is a 21st century interpretation of our federal government, where the boundaries between the federal and the state governments are mixed together. And that layer cake is a 19th century interpretation of federal government, where the federal and the state boundaries are fixed. So high schoolers across the state of Missouri and across the United States, all 16,000 school districts nationwide in the public school systems are taught these two pictures. They're shown these two pictures, layer cake and marble cake. And then they are taught, one is 21st century and the other is 19th century. So for those of you who selected the layer cake, your next generation is taught that your thinking is old, that you are outdated, that this system is not 21st century. For those of you who selected marble cake, the 4 or 5 of you, you have something in common with Generation Z and Generation Alpha. They are being taught that the layer cake system is outdated, 19th century, that the boundaries are fixed, and that the modern day system, the boundaries are mixed together, and it is the 21st century interpretation of our government. Please shut the door. So I'm going to make this statement, and this is in no way meant to be a negative against anyone who was for the layer cake or for the marble cake, but it's really important that the American people understand what I'm about to say. The marble cake revolution is a coordinated conversion of the layer cake system to the marble cake system. This convergence begins at the beginning of the 20th century in a movement called progressivism, with a marriage of abolition around 1923. Now, before I give you any more historical details, I just want to lay this groundwork. You have a super majority in your meeting that chose layer cake. Some of you chose the marble cake. And there is a coordinated convergence or conversion of the layer cake to marble cake that's taking place. And I showed that to you in the public school documents. Okay. And where does this begin? This is extremely important that these 4 characters, you walk away with from this presentation understanding the overlap in the history of these 4 characters in my premise that the layer cake system is being converted to the marble cake system in the 21st century. The first person is Elizabeth Powell on your far left on your screen. She was born in the 1740s and she died in 1830. Now, you probably haven't heard of this lady. And the reason is because she was an abolitionist. She dedicated $3,300 a month to the Abolition Society of Philadelphia when she died in 1830. That's modern dollars. It was about $100 at the time. Her family were Quakers. They fled religious persecution in Massachusetts. Her great-grandfather was being beaten, and then he gathered his wife that evening and they fled to Philadelphia. They became very good friends with William Penn, who appointed her great-grandfather the first mayor of Philadelphia. So her Quaker family were persecuted in Massachusetts, fled. They became integral parts of the Pennsylvania colony under William Penn. Her great-grandfather, great-uncle, grandfather, granduncle, her uncle, her father, her brother, and her husband were all mayors of Philadelphia. Now, why is it so important for you to know this woman as it relates to what I call the marble cake revolution? It's because she is tied to these three gentlemen throughout time. Now, this lady was the first counselor to our first president of the United States, George Washington. Now, she was not an official counselor. Like most of you, trying to live your lives and be prosperous and flee persecution and to live your lives in peace and prosperity. She was the same. Her and her husband owned property. They became wealthy because of their hard work, not because of the handouts. During the Revolution, she became very close to all of the revolutionaries: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, all of them. They all passed through her home. And after the Revolution, she became a counselor unofficially to George Washington. And what's really important to understand is that when the Constitution was created in 1787, she was there when they all came out. So the day the United States Constitution was released publicly, September 17th, 1787, she was there when all of the people who created that system came out. I hope you all pay very close attention to what I'm about to share with you, as it ties to these four figures on my screen that I hope you all can see. Elizabeth Powell asked Ben Franklin, "What form of government did you give us? A monarchy modeled after the English Roman Republic with a Caesar or a monarch and a parliament, okay? Or a republic, which was different than the Roman Republic, where they adopted a guy named Montesquieu's theory called the three-boundary republic, where you had the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches of government." So she asked, did you give us this form, the Roman Republic monarchy, or did you give us this form, the new modern version of republic? Ben Franklin told her, a republic if you can keep it. Now, this is really important to understand. She could not vote or hold office. And many of you, I heard, are getting involved in the Republican Central Committee. You guys just had your caucuses where you chose Donald Trump as your representative for the Republican ticket on the president. Congratulations. She could not do that. She could not join the party because there wasn't a Republican Party. She could not vote because she was a woman. She could not hold office. He wanted to quit. He was tired of the partisan fighting between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton over whose office was the most prestigious, the Treasury or the Department of State. She counseled him not to quit. Then in November of 1792, he told her that he was not going to run for a second term. So she wrote him a letter. And in this letter, she told him, the present system, the anti-federalist will say that you found the present system a bad one, and that you, George Washington, artfully withdrew from it because you found it to be a problem and that you were afraid of being crushed under its ruins. Because of that letter, because of her relationship with George Washington, and because of her counsel, he decided to run for a second term as president of the United States. Thank God. Because in 1801, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams introduced two political parties into the United States, the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republican Party under Thomas Jefferson. Now, he warned them, and his farewell address in 1796, he warned them. And specifically, he didn't expressly say Washington or Adams and Jefferson in his farewell address to the American people, but his warning was to both of them about the spirit of party and the damage that it will do to the United States of America in the future. Anyway, the key is when she dies in 1830, she leaves huge portion of her wealth to the Philadelphia Abolition Society. She knew the men who started the abolition movement in the United States. There is a reason why your history books in public schools in the United States in 2024 do not talk about Elizabeth Powell. The reason is because she believed in the Constitution and that it was anti-slavery. I hope if any of you are taking notes that you will write that down and remember that. The reason why Elizabeth Powell is not celebrated as a founding mother of the United States, as the first counselor of the first president of the United States, as the person who helped George Washington make the choice to take a second term as president of the United States, is because she was pro-Constitution, believing that the Constitution was anti-slavery. I hope you remember the words I just said to you. Elizabeth Powell is excreted from US history in 2024. I make the case because she was pro-Constitution, she believed it was anti-slavery, and that is why your children are not taught about this founding mother or her experience with Ben Franklin, or her experience with Benjamin Rush in educating women, or her experience in crafting the first robes of the Supreme Court Justice, Bushrod Washington, the nephew of George Washington, or I could go on for hours about her contributions to the United States of America and its preservation. The second gentleman on your screen is Frederick Douglass. You've probably heard of him. However, what you've not heard is that the gentleman to his right, Frank B. Sanborn, introduced him to John Brown in 1858. They were planning and scheming to take over a federal building in Harper's Ferry to start a slave revolt to overthrow the federal government because Frank B. Sanborn believed that the US Constitution was pro-slavery and did not need to be preserved or kept, that it needed to be dismantled because he believed it was pro-slavery. Going back to Frederick Douglass, who he introduced to John Brown, Frederick Douglass told John Brown, do not take over the federal facility in Harper's Ferry. The Constitution is anti-slavery and you should work from within it. You should not dismantle it. This escaped Black slave told John Brown not to do Harper's Ferry because he believed the Constitution was anti-slavery and should not be dismantled. As a result, Frank B. Sanborn, in collusion with William Lloyd Garrison, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry Thoreau, and others from the Northeast of the United States convinced Frederick Douglass to escape to Scotland, telling him that because he knew John Brown, he was going to be arrested and executed. When they got him to Scotland, they set him up for debates throughout his years of being there. And the title of the debates is the Constitution pro-slavery or anti-slavery? They set him up for failure, an escaped Black male slave who could not vote or run for office. And then they excreted him and marginalized Frederick Douglass because he believed that the Constitution was anti-slavery. In October of 1865, at the end of the Civil War, Frank B. Sanborn created the American Social Science Association and marginalized Frederick Douglass from participation. Why? It was their association that they believed would be the tool to dismantle a pro-slavery Constitution and Missouri Constitution. They excreted a Black escaped male slave who couldn't vote or hold office. And I make the case that this same group of people operating today have excreted an abolitionist named Eliza Powell because she believed the Constitution was also anti-slavery. Now, they agreed on one thing: abolish slavery. But they disagreed on this one major point. Frank B. Sanborn, Henry Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, William Lloyd Garrison believed that the Constitution needed to be dismantled because they believed it was inherently and structurally racist and systemically designed to protect white supremacists. Now, the reason I am telling you this story is because this affects you in the 2024, this story, what I call the marble cake revolution. And the marble cake revolution begins with the last man on your screen. His name is Charles Merriam. He was born during Reconstruction. He died in 1953 at the start of at the end of the Korean War. He believed that our Constitution needed to be dismantled, not because it was pro-slavery, because it was outdated. He did join forces with Frank B. Sanborn in the early 1900s and created the Social Science Research Council in 1923. Purpose of this council was to groom all of America's leaders, whether they were bureaucrats or elected officials, from your school board, through your superintendent, to your state legislature, through your governor, Congress, or the President of the United States. This gentleman on the right created that process. That is the point of my presentation to you this evening, is to introduce you to the groomers, the bullies, and the manipulators carrying out a marble cake revolution during your lifetime, simply because of two beliefs. On the right, Charles Merriam: the Constitution is outdated. The meaning of words change. It's time to make progress in the name of the 21st century. Versus, and joining with Frank B. Sanborn, abolition of slavery is a must. We need to eliminate all slavery, whether it's Blacks, women, animals, the Great Salt Lake, the Mississippi River, trees, nature, environment, artificial intelligence, you name it. They joined forces in the 20th century at the onset. They marginalized Frederick Douglass and Eliza Powell from our history, and they have infrastructure that they have built in order to carry out their marble cake revolution. Now, it's important for you guys to remember, I did not come up with the term marble cake. I didn't come up with the term layer cake. I simply discovered these people throughout my 14 years, Jan. I've just been studying what is self-governance and how do I do it? What is our system of government and how do we work together? And along my pathway and my journey, I've discovered these hidden figures from American children in the 21st century. As we struggle as guardians of liberty, to preserve our republic, it's important for us to understand how important the people from behind the scenes are that make the changes to our structure of government. On the right side of your screen, they have infrastructure, funding, large-scale cooperation, and a 159-year head start. On the left side of your screen, they are marginalized from history. They do not have large-scale cooperation. I can only tell you their history. So with that, I want to make one or two more points, and then I'll go straight into some more specifics with solutions, what you can do to stop the marble cake revolution. In 1787, she was told, it's a republic if you can keep it. In 1759 and 1760, he made the case. It is anti-slavery and you should keep it. He manipulated Frederick Douglass to leave the United States and told the American people while he was over there, it is pro-slavery and we need to dismantle it. Charles Merriam, during the early 1900s, said, you know what, abolitionists, you're right, but the progressive movement is smarter. We are not going to practice partisan politics anymore. We're going to create the Social Science Research Council, the National Governors Association, the National Council of State Legislatures, the National School Board Association, the Missouri School Board Association, and we will convert America's leaders to the religion of progressive abolition. They can meet at the corner of Cooperation Avenue and Association Boulevard and worship at the feet in the progressive altar of social welfare, social justice, and social security. These forces are still working together in 2024, even though the two founders are dead. What's amazing to me, ladies and gentlemen, is that 3 of the 4 of these people were counselors to 18 presidents of the United States. One of them refused because he truly believed in dismantling the Constitution, and that was Frank B. Sanborn. He did not believe in working within the system. He believed in dismantling it. However, Elizabeth Powell was a counselor to the first 5 presidents of the United States. Frederick Douglass, an escaped Black slave, was a counselor to 8 presidents of the United States from Abraham Lincoln until he died in 1895. And Charles Merriam was a counselor to the first 5 presidents of the 20th century, the last being Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who put him into great positions of power. Most of you may think of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but I hope after tonight you will remember Charles Merriam's name forever as the man who counseled 5 presidents and convinced them to change our layer cake system into a marble cake system. So who's behind the marble cake revolution? Groomers. The hidden man who changed your world, Charles Merriam. Bullies, the political weaponization of labels in government by the post-Civil War abolitionists like Southern Poverty Law Center or the Anti-Defamation League or your local media. And manipulators, those who are interested in controlling the meaning of words like parenthood and personhood. So here we go. The hidden man who changed your world convinced America's associations, National Governors Association, American Historical Association, etc., to groom your elected and bureaucrats to be cooperative through association. He is the reason in 1934 for changing our education system concerning social studies and civics education. He wrote the book. It's called Civic Education in the United States. He injected regional governments into the system. I heard the young lady speaking about the United Nations concerning water. It originates with this gentleman in this book, 1935, Regional Factors in National Planning. He wrote the book. In 1937, He was put on a commission by FDR to transfer your state legislative authority to your governor during the lockdowns, to transfer congressional authority to the President of the United States through executive order. And he wrote the book. His student, Morton Grodston, I'm going to repeat this, his student, Morton Grodston, in 1960 officially coined the phrase layer cake and marble cake to describe our systems of government, the 19th century layer cake and the 21st century marble cake. How do you stop somebody like Charles Merriam? He's dead. What do? He's in the grave at Arlington. Number one, at the federal level, convince Senator Hawley and Senator Schmidt to support the REINS Act. What is the REINS Act? It is the act to rein in that 1937 Administrative Procedures Act that Charles Merriam got Congress to pass. It's designed to help you drain the swamp, but it's not really the swamp. You know, the lady was talking about the person who was kind of looking at her in deer headlights. Most of the people in the 21st century who work for government have no idea about the marble cake revolution and how it influences their behavior. Charles Merriam merely created the doctrine. They're simply children born into the religion. At the state level, why not introduce a Missouri version of the REINS Act, where you modify the Administrative Procedures Act of Missouri? Why don't you form an Administrative Procedures Commission with your legislators to study how do we rein in the administrative bureaucracy that makes laws and rules and adjudicates and destroys people's lives outside legislative oversight? Why not form an Impacting People Commission, PPL? It stands for Pandemic, Policy, and Law. It would open the door to you to find out about the National Governors Association's role in introducing pandemic policy to your governor back in 2020. Why did all the governors seem so coordinated in their efforts to implement the same pandemic policy all at the same time, seemingly? At the local level, withdraw from X number of regional governments. Charles Merriam moved to Missouri, St. Louis specifically, to create the regional factors in the St. Louis environs back in the 1940s. You guys have over 2,500 regional governments in your state now as a result of the hidden man who changed your world. And if not, if you don't withdraw, insert the separation of powers into regional government, because Charles Merriam did not believe in checks and balances in that layer cake system. If you want more details about the hidden man who changed your world, go to this website, centerforselfgovernance.com/3MCF. 3MCF. All it means is Mr. Merriam's Marble Cake Factory. I know that's a lot for you to absorb, and I really want to encourage all of you. What I've told you tonight, the most important thing to remember is marble cake revolution is a conversion of layer cake to marble cake. Some of our historical figures who are not elected officials but were hidden, like Elizabeth and Frederick, are left out, even though they were abolitionists, because of one reason. They believed the Constitution was anti-slavery and you should work from within it. They were marginalized and excreted after the Civil War. Frank B. Sanborn created the abolitionist associations like the National Governors Association, and then in 1923, Charles Merriam married those two movements together, the progressive movement. And the results are, we have this Merriam's Marble Cake Factory with the bureaucrats doing all these crazy things, regional governments everywhere. Seems like the United Nations can sneak its fingers everywhere. And when you talk to the bureaucrats, they have their deers and headlights. What are you talking about? You're a conspiracy theorist. I just want to ask you, if you do anything tonight, learn about Charles Merriam and the Marble Cake Revolution. Okay, there's two more components of this presentation. And this is how Americans become unwitting domestic terrorists. The reason I'm making this hard shift is because the abolitionists are not the primary controllers of the associations anymore. The progressives are. Progressive movement that Charles Merriam became the first pope of, metaphorically speaking. The abolitionists are primarily in charge of non-government organizations that will label you 4 specific labels: white supremacist, extreme, hate, and anti-government. Those 4 labels, those 4 descriptions are the abolition movement of the 21st century's primary responsibility. Their objective is to get you to become so angry and so threatening that they can get the federal, state, and local law enforcement within Missouri to see you as a domestic terrorist. And I don't mean that as a joke. I mean that seriously. I know you're kind of like, oh yeah, I take it as a badge of honor. Be careful. Badge of honor can get you on a train and sent to a camp somewhere in Poland. So how Americans become unwitting domestic terrorists. I'm going to use one example. Southern Poverty Law Center. Can you guys tell me? Southern Poverty Law Center, does it provide training and intelligence to your county sheriff's department? Does Southern Poverty Law Center provide intelligence and training to Cape Girardeau's police department? Do they receive a publication called the Intelligence Project? Is your city or your county a member of a fusion center that receives intelligence and training from Southern Poverty Law Center and cooperates with the federal FBI, who uses Southern Poverty Law Center's hate list that includes 345,000 mothers, of which there are about 200 chapters of Moms for Liberty, Moms for America, parents and education groups in the state of Missouri? The FBI relies on SPLC's list to use tripwire and confidential human sourcing to infiltrate groups that they say are practicing radical religion, like Catholics in Virginia, in Richmond, in January of last year. In June of last year, Southern Poverty Law Center put literally over 340,000 mothers on their hate list alongside skinheads and white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and said they're the same. Do you know if Southern Poverty Law Center's intelligence, training, publications, journalists, researchers, analysts are operating in your state as a war machine to undermine your efforts and your mission statement for Guardians of Liberty? The Southern Poverty Law Center uses the FBI. The FBI uses their list. The Southern Poverty Law Center is allegedly used by the Transportation Security Administration of the federal government. The Southern Poverty Law Center has a publication on Department of Defense Operations Security Boards. The Southern Poverty Law Center's intelligence report literally calls it domestic terrorism, and then puts U.S. citizens who are practicing their First Amendment on their covers, like Sheriff from Arizona. SPLC's researchers labeled Moms for Liberty a hate group and met with Biden's national security officials last year 11 times. Southern Poverty Law Center has finally got one of their former attorneys to become a federal judge. Southern Poverty Law Center is supporting a federal bill in the Senate by Murray and Cantwell. I hope you have a conversation with Schmidt and Hawley about this. It's called the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, and it is endorsed by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center has a list where they list all of the groups by state. And they put them next to white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and skinheads, moms, and Family Research Council. They put them on their list next to those kind of people. Why? Because it doesn't matter whether you're Elizabeth Powell or Frederick Douglass, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter whether you're not a white supremacist or not. Their objective is to dismantle the United States Constitution and the Missouri Constitution. Their mission is not fighting white supremacy. It's dismantling the United States of America. So they have our organization listed as anti-government. They have Moms for Liberty, Moms for America, Parents in Education, Family Research Council, and many other organizations next to a few groups that have this abhorrent view that skin pigment supremacy is somehow, I don't even have the words for it. SPLC provided training to the Bureau of Land Management. SPLC, literally, their experts come into your state, work with your attorney general, work with your sheriffs, work with your local police departments in order to provide them intelligence, training, and their publication on who's on their list. Private nonprofit in the United States, acting like a central intelligence agency, an investigative arm under the storefront cover of fighting white supremacy, telling you guys this has got to stop. Missouri's Attorney General, I will use SPLC to begin spying on organizations in Michigan based on SPLC's list. They list your lawmakers who they feel are playing along with extremists in Idaho, Tammy Nichols, former state representatives. Even your Senator Hawley is on their list. Did you know that? Senator Hawley is on SPLC's list. Did you know that? They track 1,600 extremist groups. What is the definition of extreme? Do you guys think that Joe Biden is extreme? They think Donald Trump's extreme. Is there a legal definition for the word extreme? If nonprofit organizations can operate in your state while you practice your First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, all of those rights guaranteed to you, and they don't care, it's because they are post-Civil War progressive abolitionists dismantling the United States and Missouri constitutions, not because they're actually fighting white supremacy. If you want to know more about how to stop this very urgent problem of the weaponization of labels in government, and SPLC is tip of the iceberg crashing the Titanic, please go to centerforselfgovernance.com/PWOL. That stands for the political weaponization of labels. I wrote a paper in 2019 called How Americans Become Unwitting Domestic Terrorists. You have no idea. Probably what I've told you tonight is a little bit overwhelming. I understand. Most Americans are just trying to live their lives, prevent their kids from seeing craziness in some of the textbooks and library books across this country, trying to have medical health freedom, but no idea that there's a war machine to set them up for failure. I would like to work with all of you across this great country to stop the weaponization of labels in government. The SPLC cooperates with corporations, Vimeo.com, PayPal, Eventbrite, Amazon Smile, just to name a few, Nextdoor.com. They kicked off all of those mothers groups, Vimeo, Nextdoor, Eventbrite, canceled them without any remedy whatsoever. Of course, the American spirit is alive and they found alternative ways, but they don't understand they must stop this. It doesn't stop until we stop non-government organizations who are purposely weaponizing labels in government in pursuit of their post-Civil War progressive abolition objectives. SPLC, this should disturb all of you. How many public education institutions in your state, from the Missouri School Board Association to your school board, to your school district, to your high schools are using SPLC curriculum in the classroom. It's called learningforjustice.org, learningforjustice.org. They literally taught in their public school curriculum, Israel is more terrorist than Palestine. Quote. They source the media. SPLC is sourced by the media more than any other non-government organization concerning white supremacy, hate, and anti-government, and their specific list that they provide to the FBI, that they provide to your state government somewhere, I guarantee it, that they provide to one of your 115 police departments or county sheriff's department. I guarantee you at least one. So in a nutshell, SPLC weaponizes the federal, state, and local government to suppress the First Amendment rights of US citizens while enjoying the First Amendment privileges and their tax-exempt status. This is a major problem for the United States, and they are just one of about 114 organizations involved in this activity. They're the ones you can hear the most about in the media. So how do we stop the bullies? How do we stop them from bullying us? Number one, I would counsel all of you to FOIA all of your state and local law enforcement interactions with the Southern Poverty Law Center, especially your state attorney general and any urban area law enforcement. Number two, if you're willing, turn your FOIAs into CSG. If you don't know what to do with it, we will analyze, compile it, and prepare it for use. Or you can join CSG's interaction with the Federal Weaponization Committee in the House. We're going in April of this year, July and September. If you want to send a delegation from Missouri to join us, we would love to sit down with Senator Hawley. We have met with his staff in March and April of last year. He does not know that he's on the SPLC list. I think he would have an interest, and I think your former Attorney General, Eric Schmidt, may have an interest. And I'm working on that, and I would love to work with you guys to make that happen at the federal level. And then finally, we want to work together with you in 2024 to develop legislative solutions with action. These solutions with actions we're going to turn into the Federal Weaponization Committee on January 2nd, 2025. We would also, if that's not interesting to you, we want to help you craft and advance state and local, stop the political weaponization of label resolutions, policies, ordinances, and laws at the city, the county, and the state levels. Why? Because you have nonprofits directing your law enforcement outside of legislative oversight from Jeff City. We are planning to do a defamation lawsuit against SPLC, if anybody would like to join that. For more details, as I said earlier, go to centerforselfgovernance.com/PWOL. You will see everything we have handed into Congress. It's open to the public. Everything is open to the public. I would like to write something on my screen for you, just so you can also take this to the bank. I don't know if you can see this on your screen, but I would like to encourage you to go to this website. This is a political counter move. It's a counter offensive against Southern Poverty Law Center's storefront fighting white supremacy. They should be fighting all racial supremacy. And so we have created a website, and we would like to ask you to have your family, your elected officials, your corporations, your groups, anybody, to go take the pledge at rejectallracialsupremacy.com. All racial supremacy, not just white. Sign the pledge, take the pledge at rejectallracialsupremacy.com. All right, let me press on here. We're almost done. So my last presentation for you, and then when I'm done, we'll open this up for questions and answers. I'll do my best. I know it's a lot for you to absorb, but please don't be overwhelmed by this. The marble cake revolution is a 159-year head start. The groomers have an association, regional government, and they have a way to transfer legislative power. All that infrastructure already exists. You just need to see it, understand it, and our organization will help you subdue it. Secondly, the political weaponization of labels is so dangerous. Think about the Spanish Inquisition, the Great Persecution, the Salem witch trials, the Trail of Tears, the Holocaust, the pogroms of Russia, internment of Japanese, and here we are, Donald Trump with 2 impeachments, 4 indictments, 6 court cases, 91 charges, and over $400 million of so-called fines. Weaponization of labels in government historically is not progress, it's regressive. I really pray that's something that urgently we need to work to stop together. This last presentation is behind the scenes and a little bit harder to understand. But I'm working with some of your legislators in Missouri to deal with this. And that is the manipulators. They see themselves as the philosopher kings controlling the meaning of words. And there are 2 specific words that they are very interested in. The first one is personhood. Please listen carefully, and I hope your audio is working. Let me know if it's not, and I'll replay the video so we can get that squared away. So who created personhood? You should ask yourself this question. Who created personhood? Do you guys have an answer for that? Did the government create personhood? Did you create personhood? Did Allah? Did God? Did the Big Bang? Evolution? Who created parenthood? The state of Missouri? The public school district? The Constitution of the United States? Who created parenthood? Who created personhood? Evolution, the Big Bang, Allah, God, butterflies, reincarnation? Who created personhood? Who created parenthood? Listen carefully, please.
And the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
Do you have an answer in the book?
At present, the best guess we have is keep them happy with drugs and computer games. But this doesn't sound like a very appealing future.
So Yuval Harari is a counselor to the World Economic Forum's Klaus Schwab. He's also a professor at Hebrew University in Israel. He wrote a book called Homo Deus, which I highly recommend. Either you read the book or you can go to our website. I'll direct you. I have basically a 38-page summary of his 400-page book. The reason why this book is so important is that with the advancement of technology, there is a growing belief between science of biology and the science of technology about the convergence of Homo sapien into a new type of being called Homo Deus, which means man gods. And so across the world, you're starting to see legislatures passing laws regarding personhood. For example, back in the 2017 timeframe, New Zealand passed a law making the Wanganui River a person. In 2019, in the United States, bringing that closer to home, a Connecticut state court allowed a human to represent a dog in court against its owner. Moving closer to our time frame, 2 weeks ago in Utah, some of my students introduced a bill called personhood. but it was from our version of language regarding personhood, who created personhood. And what it caused is the people who believe, like Yuval Harari, that humans are not apex, that they are in a parliament of beings equal to the frequency of whales, the frequency of bats, etc. They came into Utah to protest this bill. So I would encourage you to go look up the Utah Personhood Bill and then do your own Google, Bing, or DuckDuckGo search on all of the people who came out against that bill, and just begin to get yourself familiar with how important it is for your children and grandchildren that you are part of the debate in Missouri regarding the meaning of personhood in the 21st century. On September 28th, 2021, Virginia Democrat governor candidate Terry McAuliffe said,
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
On September 29th, 2021, the National School Board Association wrote in a letter to President Biden that they were facing a, quote, immediate threat. Threats they alleged were attacks against school board members for approving policies for masks, and facing physical threats because of so-called, quote, propaganda purporting the false inclusion of critical race theory. As such, the NSBA requested the president label these, quote, heinous acts as forms of domestic terrorism and hate crimes, and forming a joint collaboration between federal, state, and local law enforcement in coordination with public school officials. The National School Board Association represents all 50 state school board associations and more than 90,000 school board members who govern 14,000 school boards across the United States. On September 30th, 2021, the following exchange took place between Senator Mike Braun and Education Secretary Miguel Cardona as to whether or not parents are the primary stakeholders in a child's future.
Do you think parents should be in charge of their child's education as the primary stakeholder?
I believe parents are important stakeholders, but I also believe educators have a role in determining educational programming.
And I think that's going to be a little out of focus. What I think you're going to find across all elements of education, since they pay the bills, they raise the kids, they probably need to be the primary spokespeople for their own kids' good education.
In response to the September 29th NSBA letter, Attorney General Garland on October 4th puts forth a memorandum directing a partnership amongst federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement to, quote, address threats against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff. So the parenthood and the personhood matters are extremely important in terms of just those two words. We tend to use the word parental rights. I would like to encourage you to change the word rights to the word hood, parenthood. And when it comes to persons, to understand how important the word personhood is. I've explained the personhood piece. Consider at the federal level, convincing Schmidt, Hawley, and your other congressional delegates to form a personhood commission at the federal level. They are in desperate need to refine, reform, or amend all of the federal law regarding the definition of person at the federal level of government. At the state level, I would like to encourage you to introduce a state constitutional amendment on personhood and parenthood, introduce a state law on personhood and parenthood, and prohibit giving artificial intelligence or machine learning any human or non-human rights. Come out ahead of it and don't wait for it. Make sure you're proactive. Prohibit artificial intelligence or machine learning from owning any copyright, patent, or entering into a contract. And then finally, at the local level, pass resolutions, proclamations, policies, ordinances, recognizing the following language, critical language: parents as the primary stakeholder in their children's upbringing. That word upbringing is critical word, and the word stakeholder, as someone mentioned earlier, list all the stakeholders, very important word, and the word primary. Those three words are critical in this statement, so please don't change those if you do this. Parents as the primary stakeholder in their children's upbringing. I want to make sure you're very clear on that word stakeholder. It is not a legal term. It is a private, public term used by the associations that were created and advanced by Charles Merriam and Frank B. Sanborn. It is advanced by Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. He wrote the book called Stakeholder Capitalism. And it is important that it is not meant to say that you share partnership or whatever with your child. Legally, when your child goes to any education between whatever ages Missouri says they have to, you are technically a stakeholder under their bureaucracy, not within the state law. Anyway, I'm going too deep with that, but please, this language is critically important. Resolutions, proclamations, policies, ordinances, and even laws at the state level. If you want more details on this, please go to our website, centerforselfgovernance.com/PPS. It just means personhood, parenthood, statehood. For any information about what I've presented to you today or regarding our training, go to our website, centerforselfgovernance.com. You can also email us or call us. You can follow us on all the social medias that aren't busy crashing across the country or the world. We would love to train you in leadership and self-governance to practice the art of systematic politics. So together across our country, we can stop the marble cake revolution. And with that, Jan, I'll turn this back over to you. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
All right, we do have questions, Mark. So we'll get the microphone to you. Please speak into the microphone clearly so Mark can hear. And is this okay to continue recording during Q&A? Just remember, it is being recorded. Okay.
Well, really, I have a statement, and then I do have a question for you. You were talking about the personhood and the push now to define personhood and how AI is coming into play with all of this. You are probably familiar with this, but I don't know that many people are. There are actually 501c3s right now that are being organized to represent AI sentience. So if you in any way abuse these sentience or speak cruel words to them or whatever, you can actually be held legally accountable for speaking to them in this regard. And you're probably familiar with that, but I wanted to share that with you. And then secondly, you had mentioned that Senator Hawley is on the SBLC list.
Yes.
I'm actually going to be seeing him in about 3 days. Is there something that you would like for me to talk to him about when I see him and kind of prep him for that? Because I'm happy to do that.
Yes. So centerforselfgovernance.com/PWOL. On the site, the list of concerns where they list, you can find that concern. You can print that off and share that with him if you like. Also, our goal is not to violate SPLC's First Amendment rights like they are ours. Our goal is to prevent them from directing federal, state, and local law enforcement resources against you in your state. And I think we need to have further conversations, ma'am. I'm willing to be a part of that, but I would love to train you guys on how to stop the political weaponization of labels in government. That's my main mission. But I'm happy to interact with Senator Hawley. I'll be going in April, July, and September. So if you want to brief him on that, he's on the list. We want to work with him once the Republicans take over the Senate. Item number 2, we would like to ask them to form a weaponization committee under the judiciary of the Senate. I would like as an organization, CSG, to work with whoever runs that committee or the judiciary to enact solutions that they can copy from the House and be prepared for during their tenure during 2025 through 2026. So two asks. Go to the website, download the concerns that shows that he's on the list. Number two, we want to interact with him in preparation for the Republicans taking over the Senate, specifically the judiciary. Would he be willing to form a weaponization committee fashioned in the model of the House? And could we work with him? Can we work together? We want to stop it, not violate SPLC's nonprofit status or First Amendment rights. That's not our objective. We want to stop them from directing federal, state, and local law enforcement to violate our First Amendment, our religious freedoms, our political participation. It's not right, and it needs to stop.
Everybody be thinking about your questions. Mark, I do want to introduce you to Michelle Latham. So she is very involved in city government, and hopefully, well, I'm just going to say she's going to be the next mayor of Cape Girardeau City, because that's faith, right? We have to believe. And so she has just been, oh my goodness, right? I don't know what else to say. So I'm going to give her your contact. You guys can chat back and forth.
Thank you so much.
And you need someone to go to Washington with you, you said? Or you would
If
like
you
to?
have people like, I've taken, so I don't know if you're familiar with Representative Maisie Christensen. She was just recently married.
Maisie Boy? Yes. Yes, Maisie Boy, oh yes.
Yeah, she was just recently married to Cole Christensen. He's a former state representative of North Dakota. He resigned to come join her in Missouri. He's one of my students, and I took him to DC. I would like to take both Cole and Maisie to DC to meet with the Missouri delegation. So absolutely, I think it would be important for you guys to realize the federal government is not lost. The people in the government have been trained under this marble cake infrastructure. So think of it more as a detox. We need to rebuild our immune system. And it's important for us to engage and not neglect. And so anybody who would like to join us in DC in April, July, or September, we would be honored for you to participate in our efforts to stop the weaponization of labels in government.
Other questions? How do we know if we're on the list is a question.
So you go to the SPL Center, splcenter.org, splcenter.org. So don't do two C's, only one C, splcenter.org. And then you'll go to their, they have different tabs. So Fighting Hate tab, under their Fighting Hate, they will have their maps, and then they will have their various lists. So there's their anti-government list, there's their white supremacy list. They mix them together, and yeah, so that's how you'll find it.
Interesting. Any other questions, concerns, thoughts? Well, yeah, so you can continue to think about thoughts. We have plenty of time here. And I wanted to just say several thoughts. Mark, you would be people here know about Mrs. Powell, very much so. And so I used to open up a lot of meetings with Mrs. Powell. A Republic form or a Republic ma'am if you can keep it. Let's see, I had some other thoughts. You want to tell this, let's talk about block 1 coming up in September. And then
That's right.
I would also, if you wouldn't mind, to share the awesome story about your daughter.
Okay. So yes, there is our block 1 class is going to be held on September 24th there in Cape Girardeau. And so please register. You can go to our website, again, centerforselfgovernance.com. All you have to do is I want to join a class. It'll be there. You register. So I believe, Jan, are we going to be there in person, or will it be via Zoom?
Well, I would love to have you here in person, always.
Okay, so you just coordinate that with Pam.
I am coordinating with Pam, and so don't go sign up yet because we are yet still working on the link for that. Because if we have a mass participation, that kind of thing.
Perfect. That particular class is, I go into much more depth regarding Elizabeth, Frederick, Frank B. Sanborn, and Charles Merriam, and more specifically, Charles Merriam's infrastructure to prepare you to be successfully competitive at the local and state level, not as an elected official per se, but as a Mrs. Powell, as a Frederick Douglass. I am very impressed by Elizabeth Powell and Frederick Douglass, for many reasons, but primarily because they believed in the Constitution. They believed it was anti-slavery, and they worked within the system. They never gave up on it, like Frank B. Sanborn did and Charles Merriam. They continued to use the system until they died. And between the two of them, they were counselors to 13 presidents. Guys, that's 30% of our presidents. That's huge. 2 people who couldn't vote or run for office. And so they just inspire me, because there's a lot of people in America who are disenfranchised, demoralized. They feel like there's nothing that can be done, always looking to someone to save them, right? And so they just kind of hide in their houses and just give up. But you don't, and I'm not critiquing anyone who runs for office. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm talking about those of you who are like, I can never be an elected official. I'm a mom and I've got kids to raise. Elizabeth Powell is your pattern. Frederick Douglass, you feel like you're marginalized, you're excreted. They talk about you, they gossip about you, they leave you out of the meetings. Frederick Douglass is your pattern. They couldn't vote or hold office, but they were counselors to 30% of the presidents of the United States. It's mind-blowing. And so they are models to me. I don't ever want to run for office. I don't think I ever can or will. But I model my life after those 2 great patterns from the 18th and 19th century. And I see myself in their shoes. I can empathize with them. I don't know how to say it. I get it. I don't know how else to say it. I get it. But I'm going to do my part in honor of their legacy. And so I began to research Elizabeth Powell and Frederick Douglass. And my wife and I were not married at the time, but we held a convention there at Mrs. Powell's house on Chestnut Street, 2 blocks from Independence Hall, where the Constitution was formed, where the Declaration was ratified. She lived 2.5 blocks from there. And so we held a convention at Mrs. Powell's house. And that's where I asked my wife to marry me, on the 2nd floor, where the first 4 presidents of the United States danced. The very first 4 presidents of the United States danced on the 2nd floor of Mrs. Powell's house. So I asked my wife to marry me on that floor. I was going to ask her to marry me in a really beautiful scene. I bought 23 acres, beautiful rock wall across the valley. Nobody would ever move there. Just incredible view. I took her up there the week before the convention, and I was like, do I ask her to marry me here, the beautiful scene, or do I ask her to marry me at Mrs. Powell's house on the 2nd floor where the first 4 presidents danced? And I called all my CSG compatriots. I might have even called you, Jan. I don't know, but I called Michelle Perkins, Jan, and what do I do? And nobody would tell me what to do, but they were like, it would be really cool if you did it at Mrs. Powell's house, but we're not telling you to do that, So I ended up asking Pam to marry me at Mrs. Powell's house, and the look she gave me, she looked like she was going to kill me, Jan.
I was there.
I know you were there. She crossed her arms, and thank God she said yes. And then we were married, in the little town of Republic, Washington. And I told her, I didn't know there was a town called Republic in Washington. There's a Republic, Missouri. And I told her, I said, I want to get married in Republic. She said, okay. So we got married in the little town where I was going to build this house in Republic. And then in October of 2016, she got pregnant. And I told her, I said, Pam, this baby's going to be born on the 4th of July. And she said, no, Mark, I've had 4 kids before this one. And no, it's not going to happen on the 4th of July. I said, okay, I'm not a woman. I don't know how that works. So I trust you. But I just had this gut feeling, 4th of July, baby. And July 3rd, 2017, she starts having contractions. And I told her, I said, Pam, you're going to have this baby on the 4th of July. And she says, I don't know, but you might be right, while she's having contractions. And I said, I want this baby to be born in Republic. So we went to Republic. And she was born at John 3:16 on July 4th, 2017. And we named her after Elizabeth Powell. So that was the young girl that you just met, Eliza. And now what's really cool is in St. George, Utah, in Washington County, St. George City, Washington County, there is a group of people who are going to rebuild Mrs. Powell's house on the west side of the United States so that we can bring millions of kids from this side of the country who never get to travel to the east side to hear those stories because it's too expensive. 10 grand for 1 week. How many kids are ever going to get to go to see Mrs. Powell's house and learn about it? So anyway, this group, because of our training and learning about Mrs. Powell, we're going to rebuild her home and open it on the 250th anniversary of the United States on July 4th, 2026. And my daughter will be 9 years old. And when they open the door, they're going to let my daughter open the door first. Sorry. Our next generation, if they understood how incredibly invaluable the legacy of Elizabeth Powell and Frederick Douglass are to the keeping of our republic in 2024, is beyond my ability. That's why I talk so much. And I apologize for overwhelming all of you, but I'm just so thankful that Elizabeth Powell's legacy will come to the west side of the United States in 2026 on the 250th anniversary of the United States. So that's all I got, Jen.
Yep. How cool is that? What a story. That's cool. And if you ever get a chance to go to see what we got to see, that was phenomenal. It was cool to dance on the same floor. We had group dancing. We did some old time dancing, and it was just a lot of fun. Okay, so what I've done here on Rita's phone is I pulled up centerforselfgovernance.com. So you don't just have to wait for the next class or anything. There are a lot of things on here that you can do on your own. So I know I've said it before, there's a Missouri Constitution class. I guess that's still there, isn't it, Mark? I haven't looked for your trainings lately.
Yes, and yes, it is greatly expanded, by the way.
Wonderful. So maybe we'll just do that sometime in September as well. But you go on here. You guys go ahead and pull it up on your phones if you want. centerforselfgovernance.com. There's personalized instruction. And I'm always about, what can I do at my own home at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep? Oh, let's go in and sign up for a $10 class. And it's a, usually, I don't know, are they still about 2-hour classes, most of them?
All of our classes are 2 hours, except the bottom line civics about living a politically disease-free life. That is 2 sessions, 4 hours.
How about that? So anyway, you guys, centerforselfgovernance.com, there's all kinds of information. And I just want to say thank you, Mark, because you never gave up. I know I gave up a time or two through all this, but we've stayed friends and I'm so thankful for that. And you had a vision that I could never imagine. And after going through LaVoy Finicum's, by the way, the Bundy Ranch, that was something I was still working with Mark at the time. And he was in Utah. That's another whole story, but he's sending out this text to the few of us who were still working, and he says, we're going up. And so we all went to prayer as Mark went up to the Bundy Ranch and took actual footage. And then Mark says a few weeks later, I think we need to make a movie. This is all way over my head. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a visionary. I don't see those things. Well, now we have the movie. We have 5 DVDs and you guys are gonna see them. And they're available for purchase actually at a discounted price for every one of you if you want to order them right now on the website. Pam and Mark have made that available. $50 worth of DVDs for $25. So that's available. We're gonna send all this out in the newsletter. So, all right, what else, you guys? There's gotta be something else. All right, Mark. What else?
Just wanted to say thank you guys to Guardians of Liberty and all those in attendance. Thanks for having me come to speak to you tonight. Know that our organization has one objective: train leaders in self-governance who practice systematic politics and compete within the marble cake revolution. The films that we made were unexpected, kind of like Eliza. It was unexpected. But we made these films about these peoples whose lives were destroyed by the weaponization of labels in government. January 6th and others, Donald Trump, are tip of the iceberg when it comes to the agenda of some of these organizations. So I want to encourage you, please, if you don't go through our training, go to those sites so that you can work on some of those things. If you're willing, please take our training to learn how to compete within this arena. And I guarantee you, you will make a huge difference, not just for your community, but for your state and for this nation. Jan, and thanks, Jan, for having me back to talk to your group. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you all.